Fix it today. I'll pay whatever you ask. The bills landed on the wet metal hood of the open toolbox, $5,000 in a rubber-banded stack, and they sat there, darkening slowly in the rainwater that dripped from the ceiling. The woman with copper hair didn't drop the money the way someone tosses out garbage. She didn't offer it the way someone hands out charity either. She set it down the way a gambler sets down a chip on the table, expecting to win. Dean Marlowe didn't straighten up from the engine. "Ma'am, money doesn't fix physics." The rain hammered the tin roof of the shop, steady, stubborn, 3 hours now, without letting up. Dean had both hands buried to the wrist in the guts of an orange sedan, a work lamp hanging from a hook above his head, swaying just slightly with the draft coming through the open bay door. He hadn't looked up when she came in. He'd heard her, heels on wet concrete, the purr of an expensive car outside, then the sharp silence of someone who isn't used to waiting. "I didn't ask about physics." Victoria Hale crossed her arms. Her white blouse clung to her shoulders, soaked through, and she didn't seem to notice or didn't care. "I asked how much is in that stack. Tell me if you need more." "I don't need more." Dean finally pulled a hand free, wiped it on a rag that hadn't cleaned anything in years, and picked up the damp stack of bills with 2 fingers in no hurry at all. "I need you to understand something. An engine doesn't run because you lay cash on top of it. It runs because the parts do what they're built to do in the order they're built to do it, and that takes exactly as long as it takes. Then make it take less time. That's not up to me, ma'am. That's up to the timing belt, the camshaft, and whatever happened to this car before you ever got your hands on it." He held the stack out over the edge of the hood. "Put it away. I don't even know yet if I can fix it." She didn't take it. "Put it away yourself." Victoria glanced at her watch, a quick, almost involuntary motion that Dean caught out of the corner of his eye. "It's a down payment. The rest, when the engine's running and I'm out of this garage. I need it to start before sunrise. Not tomorrow, not when it clears up. Before sunrise." Dean did look up then. It was the first time he really looked at her straight on. Somewhere in her 30s, copper hair plastered to her face from the rain, chin held high, mouth pressed into a line he recognized from somewhere and couldn't place. It wasn't the look of an angry woman. It was something else, tighter, something further in, papered over with pride, the way you cover a leak with a rag. It holds for a while, then the water finds a way through. "Before sunrise," he repeated. "Ma'am, I don't even know what's wrong with this car yet." "Then find out." She uncrossed her arms to check the phone, buzzing in her wet hand, a call she thumbed away without answering. Fast, fast, fast. Dean huffed, half laugh, half exhaustion, and turned back to the hood. "Everybody tells me fast. The car never tells me fast. The car tells me what's wrong with it whenever it feels like telling me, and you just have to sit there and listen. You run a company, don't you? It shows. You talk to an engine like it's an employee who turned in a late report." He reached in, tested a hose, squeezed it, let it go. "Well, this employee isn't scared of you, ma'am, or your $5,000, so you're going to have to let me listen to it before you start making demands." Victoria's jaw tightened, but she didn't answer. She stood there watching him work, rain running down the back of her neck, and Dean felt her eyes on his back, measuring him, pricing him. "So why did it have to be tonight?" he said, without turning around, checking the filter. "In this storm, and you decide to go driving around in a 50-year-old hunk of metal you just bought?" "Yes." The word came out clipped, dry, no decoration. It had to be tonight. Something in the way she said it made Dean's hand go still for a second. He didn't turn around, but he filed it away, that word, tonight, that weighed more than the wet stack of bills, and he kept working. "Look!" He pulled the dipstick, wiped it, slid it back in, pulled it out again, and held it up to the lamp. "This car didn't break down just now. This has been warning you for a while. The oil's black, the belt's cracked, there's a hose that's been sweating for who knows how long. Nobody who'd driven this engine more than 2 weeks would take it out at 11 at night in the rain without hearing it cough first. Cars warn you quiet. You've got to be listening." "Well, I didn't hear it. I noticed." Dean crouched lower. What do you listen for in things, ma'am? Because folks in a big hurry, their ears get stopped up for anything that isn't loud. They only hear what shouts. Victoria didn't answer that, and that silence said more than any answer could have. Dean figured he'd hit something. You always talk to your customers like this, she said, finally getting her edge back. Because I don't know how you're still in business. I don't get a lot of customers in white blouses with $5,000 in their purse. That's true. Dean tightened a bolt without looking at her. Mine are from around here. Folks who bring their car in because their job depends on that car, and their meals depend on that job. I don't talk to them like this. I talk to them soft because they're already plenty worried without me piling on. And why not me? Because you didn't come in worried? You came in giving orders, and that's not the same thing. He straightened up for a second to look at her. The one who comes in worried asks. You came in commanding, and I've spent the whole night waiting to see which one of the two you really are, because the car's only going to open up for the one who asks, not the one who orders. I'm scared of wasting time, Victoria said sharp. I'm not scared of you. Don't confuse the two. I'm not confusing anything, but I'll tell you something for free, even though you didn't ask for it. Dean loosened a clamp. You're scared of the clock. And a person who carries that kind of scared around ends up treating everybody like an obstacle between them and the hour, pushing people out of the way to get there sooner. He looked at her. I don't know what you're racing against, but I'm telling you in case it helps. Don't show up shoving people down. You can get there on time without leaving half the world flat on the road behind you. Victoria stared at him a long moment, and for an instant it looked like she might snap out another order, but she didn't. She bit her lip, glanced out at the flooded street through the open door, and something in her shoulders dropped half an inch. I need it to start, she said, and the word need came out different from everything before it. Lower, more honest, less like a boss, and more like a person. Now that sounds like a human being, Dean said, and ducked back under the hood. Let's get moving. The car isn't yours, he said, not quite a question. I bought it 2 weeks ago at a classic car lot. Somebody loved it a long time before you did. Dean ran a hand along the edge of the hood, over the faded but well-kept orange paint. A car like this doesn't survive by accident. Somebody put hours into it. Hands, whole Sundays. This isn't a car you buy, ma'am. It's a car you inherit, and somebody sold it to you like it was just another piece of scrap metal. It works fine as scrap metal for me. I need it to run for 3 hours tonight, that's all. Well, that's the hard part. Dean grabbed the lamp and lowered it into the depths of the engine bay, down toward the block, down to where metal met metal in old, clean welds. Let me see what's hurting. And that's when it happened, with the light finally falling at just the right angle. Something under all that grime made his hands stop dead. He didn't know why. Not yet. He just felt that strange cold in the pit of his stomach he used to get when a machine spoke to him in a language he'd heard before. He lowered the lamp further, narrowed his eyes, raised it again like the light had lied to him. What's wrong, Victoria? Stepped in half a pace. Is it bad? Dean didn't answer. He ran his thumb over a bracket over the odd curve of hand-filed metal and went very still. Give me a minute, he said very quietly, more to the engine than to her. Where'd you get this car? Victoria didn't answer the question. Instead, her phone buzzed again, and this time she did answer, stepping 2 paces toward the door, turning her back on Dean, as if that would keep him from hearing. He heard everything. In an empty shop at night, with nothing but the rain in the background, you hear everything. Roy. Her voice changed when she spoke into the phone harder, more like the office. I know what time it is. I'm handling it. On the other end, a man's voice, tight and tinny through the speaker, filled the space between one drumbeat of rain and the next. Victoria, listen to me, the voice said. You're alone at night at some garage in who knows where with a car you don't know anything about and a mechanic you can't vouch for? That's not an emergency, that's a liability. A CEO stranded in some neighborhood at midnight is a headline waiting to happen. You didn't call to protect my image, Roy. You called to get me out of there, send someone for another car. Rent whatever's available. Buy the one the neighbor's got sitting in his driveway. Your time is worth more than any car in this city. Roy Kane's voice sped up, got more reasonable, and because of that, harder to ignore. Or sue the dealer who sold you that broken down wreck. I'll have it in writing before sunrise, but get out of that garage, Victoria. You've got no business being there. None of that gets me up that mountain in time, Roy. A silence on the other end, then quieter. Nothing gets you up that mountain in time in this storm. The airport's closed. The highway's closed. Nobody's driving up there tonight. Not you, not a helicopter, not the governor himself. Quit fighting the weather. The weather doesn't sign agreements. I'm going to make it up there. Not in that car. Not in that car. Victoria hung up without saying goodbye and stood a moment staring at the dark screen before she put it away. Dean didn't say anything. He kept his hands in the engine, pretending he hadn't heard what he'd heard, but something inside him had settled differently. A CEO, a storm, a mountain, an old car that had to climb a closed road that very night. None of it fit the proud woman in the white blouse, and all of it was starting to fit that word, tonight, she'd said, like it was being torn out of her. When she came back, Dean picked the $5,000 up off the edge of the hood and pressed it into her hand, folding her fingers closed around the damp stack. Here, I don't want it sitting there. Now you don't want it? Victoria looked at him somewhere between disbelieving and mocking. Everybody wants it, mister. Some just say so, and some don't. I say so. Dean went back to the engine. I don't work with your money sitting on top of my hands. Makes me nervous, and nervous hands break things. I'm going to make this real clear so there's no confusion. If I fix your car, you pay me what the work costs, not $1 more. And if I can't fix it, you don't pay me anything because I won't have solved a thing for you. Why does it matter so much to you staying square with me? Most people take what falls in their lap. Because it's not a bribe, ma'am, and you're treating it like one. Dean straightened up a little, looked at her. You're not paying me to leave you alone, or to disappear, or to buy my silence about anything. You're paying me to make a car run. That gets paid for by the job, not by the stack. Money sitting on the hood just muddies the ledger. Keep it until there's something to pay for. Victoria stood there with the bills in her hand, wet, awkward, not knowing for the first time all night where to put them. She ended up shoving the stack into her coat pocket, and Dean noticed it cost her something, that putting the money away was harder for her than pulling it out. Like without it in her hand, she was suddenly missing the only tool she knew how to use. Fine. She came back to the hood looking inside for real this time, not to check up on an employee, but to understand what exactly had failed her tonight. What's wrong with it? Tell me in words I'll understand. In words you'll understand, Dean thought it over a second, hunting for the comparison. Picture your company like a body. The gas is the blood. The pump is the heart that pushes it through. If the heart beats steady, everything moves, arms, legs, head. But if the heart fails, doesn't matter how healthy the arms are, doesn't matter how much blood you've got stored up, the whole thing goes down at once. And this heart is failing. That's what I'm trying to find out. Could be the heart, could be a clogged vein, could be something small. That's why I can't tell you yet how long it'll take. Until I open it up all the way, I don't know if I'm stitching a finger or the whole chest. He shifted the lamp. You run a big outfit full of people, you ought to know it's not the same thing a cold and a heart attack, even though both feel like exhaustion the first day. Victoria went quiet. The comparison hit her harder than Dean expected. My father had a heart attack, she said low, months ago. He never fully recovered from it, and I was in a meeting in another city closing a deal. They told me by text message. I answered, keep me posted, and kept sitting in the meeting. She swallowed. Keep me posted, that's what I said back to my father's heart attack. Dean didn't say anything at first. There wasn't anything good to say to that. He lowered the lamp and kept searching for the heart of the engine. Don't tell me I shouldn't have. Victoria crossed her arms defensively. I already know. I tell myself every night since then. I wasn't going to say that. Dean pulled his head out for a moment. I was going to say, keep me posted is what you answer when you've spent your whole life believing being informed is the same as being present. It's not meanness, ma'am, it's habit. An ugly habit, but a habit. He went back under the hood. My father used to send word through old Eddie when we were on the outs. Tell my boy the truck's ready. And I'd say, tell him I'll pick it up. Never did pick it up. He tightened something with the wrench. We talked to each other through go-betweens, same as you through a signed check. And one day, there was nowhere left to send word, so don't throw stones at me. We're cut from the same cloth, the two of us. Yours just has more zeros on it. That's what I'm trying to find out. Dean moved the lamp. Hand me that light. The little one on the bench. I need it down here. She hesitated, looked at the workbench covered in scrap metal and stained rags, found the small lamp, picked it up by the clean part of the handle, and handed it to him. Thank you. Dean switched it on, aimed it into the depths, and bent back over that spot that had given him the chill in his stomach. And there it was again. The way the wiring was dressed, the way the cable bundles were tied with cloth tape instead of spiral plastic, always wound the same direction. A bracket on the alternator that wasn't factory hand-filed with a curve that served no mechanical purpose except to give 3 extra millimeters of clearance when tightening the belt. A trick. Not a manual trick. A trick that belonged to exactly one person in the entire world. Dean went very still. He felt his mouth go dry. What's wrong with you? Victoria looked at him. You got quiet. Is it bad? Just tell me, how long and how much, and let's go. Where did you get this car? His voice came out different, none of the roughness from before, almost strained. I asked you that already, and you didn't give me a straight answer. I need one now. Who did the lot buy it from? Did they tell you where it came from? From a classic car lot on the other side of town. I didn't ask where it came from before that. I bought a pretty car that ran. She looked at him, and something in his face made her drop her guard a little. Why is it stolen? Is there some legal problem? Because if that's it, I can fix that with one phone call. It's not the kind of problem you fix with a phone call. Dean pulled his head out from under the hood, his face pale under the grime and the yellow light. He wiped his hands slowly, staring at the engine the way you look at someone you thought was dead who just moved. Because this engine, ma'am, I already saw it built like this once in my life, and the man who built it has been dead 2 years. The rain on the tin roof suddenly seemed louder. I don't understand, Victoria said. Neither do I, not yet. Dean stood up all the way for the first time that night, dragging his forearm across his forehead without taking his eyes off the hood. But there's a way of dressing an engine, ma'am, same as there's a way of writing a letter. People think an engine's just an engine, that they all get built the same because they've all got the same parts. They don't. Whoever puts it together leaves their handwriting in how they tie the wires and how they file a bracket and where they put a chalk mark nobody else will ever see because it's underneath where the eye never reaches. He pointed at the bottom without touching it. This engine has my father's handwriting on it. Your father, Walt Marlowe. Dean said it slowly, like a man setting down something heavy he'd been carrying a while. This shop was his. I inherited it when he died. And that bracket filed with that extra curve, that curve doesn't do a thing mechanically. It's there so thick fingers like his could reach in and adjust the belt without burning themselves on the manifold. He invented that himself. I watched him file one just like it when I was 12 years old, on a Sunday, on that lathe in the corner. Nobody else on this earth files a bracket like that. Nobody. Victoria stayed quiet. She looked at the engine, at the orange car, at the grease-stained man in front of her, and for a moment, the rush, the clock, the mountain, all of it hung suspended in the wet air. Are you sure? No, that's why I want somebody else to come look. Dean pulled the phone from his pocket, dialed, put it to his ear. Hold on a second. On the other end, it rang and rang until an old, gravelly voice answered, with the irritation of someone woken at the wrong hour. Well, who's bothering a body at this hour of God's own night, Pop Eddie? It's Dean. Sorry about the hour. Can you come by the shop for a minute? It's important. To the shop in this downpour, boy? Are you crazy, or did you just lose a screw somewhere? Eddie Coleman's voice crackled through the speaker. What happened? You fall down? Cut yourself? Get yourself into some kind of mess? Nothing happened to me. It's a car. I need you to look at an engine with your own two eyes. And believe me, Pop Eddie, it's worth getting wet for. I wouldn't call you at this hour for anything less. A silence. Then a long sigh, the kind old men let out once they've already decided yes, but still want to collect on the complaining first. I'm coming then. But if I catch pneumonia, you're the one nursing me and making my soup. And he hung up. Who's Pop Eddie? Victoria asked. The oldest mechanic on this street. Had his shop on the corner since before I was born. Dean put the phone away. And he was my father's best friend. They drink coffee here every single morning, the two of them, on that stool right there, where you set your purse down, arguing about politics and engines until the sun came up. If there's anybody on this earth who can tell me whether I'm crazy or not, it's Pop Eddie. Pop Eddie showed up 5 minutes later, wrapped in a yellow raincoat 2 sizes too big, a knit cap pulled down to his eyebrows, rubber boots splashing with every step. 74 years old, a face wrinkled like an old work glove, eyes quick and bright. He shook off the water in the doorway, looked Victoria up and down with no discretion whatsoever, then looked at the orange car and stood stock still. Well, I'll be Pop, Eddie said very quietly. Well, I'll be. He walked to the hood slowly dripping and leaned in. He didn't touch anything, just looked, hands behind his back, the way you look at somebody laid out at a wake. You see it? Dean asked. Hush, boy, let me look good. These eyes don't see like they used to. Pop Eddie leaned in further, squinted, found the alternator bracket, the wiring, the way it was tied, and when he found it, something in his old face came loose all at once. Oh, Walt, you old fool. It's his, Dean's voice tightened. Tell me I'm crazy, Pop Eddie. Tell me I'm just imagining it because I'm tired. You're not imagining a thing, son. The old man straightened up slowly, one hand at his lower back, and turned to look at Dean with eyes wet from something that wasn't the rain. Your daddy built that engine. Rest his soul. I was here. Must have been 6, 7 years before he passed. Orange car belonging to some fella from up on the ridge had it sitting abandoned in a field, weeds grown up through it. Your father rebuilt it piece by piece. A whole winter right here, right on this floor where we're standing. I lent him my lathe when his own broke down that Sunday. He pointed at the bracket with a trembling finger. That little curve he showed it to me himself, said the good Lord gave him mason's fingers and a watchmaker's engines, and somebody had to give, and it wasn't going to be his fingers. I laughed at him. Never thought I'd see that engine again. Dean let out a laugh that broke halfway through his throat closing up. It was exactly the kind of thing his father would have said. Mason's fingers, watchmaker's engines. He'd heard it 1,000 times in that very building. You remember anything else about that winter? Dean asked, without lifting his head from the hood, his voice no longer the mechanic's voice, but the son's from back when he was little and helped with anything at all. I remember he complained something fierce. Pop Eddie chuckled low, settling onto the stool. That car came in half dead, boy. Missing parts you couldn't buy anymore, same as tonight, and instead of telling the owner it couldn't be done, he shut himself in here to invent them, Sunday after Sunday. Your mama used to send his lunch over because he wasn't even coming home to eat, and I'd come sit with him and tell him he was crazy that the job was going to cost him more than the whole car was worth. And what did he say? Same thing you're about to say. The old man looked at him fondly. He'd say, Eddie, there's cars a man fixes for money, and there's cars a man fixes because somebody loved them once, and it ain't right they die of plain neglect. This one's the second kind. He sighed. Never did get paid right for that job. Fella from the ridge only ever paid half what he owed, and your daddy let it go. Said the engine came out so pretty, it was payment enough just looking at it. Dean stood a moment with his hands still on the block. Just like tonight, he murmured. A car somebody loved a great deal, about to die of neglect. A rainy night, just like tonight, Pop Eddie said. That's why it came back. Victoria, listening from the bench, worked up the nerve to speak. What was he like, your father? She asked it carefully, almost apologetic for intruding. The one who built this car, if you don't mind me asking. Dean thought it over, hands gone still. Stubborn as a mule, proud, rough around the edges, folks say, same as me. A half smile crept up under the grease. But with machines it was different. With machines he was gentle. He talked to them, called the ugliest old pickup trucks in the world sweetheart, and he never ever left a car sitting if the owner couldn't pay. He carried half the neighborhood on credit, died without a dollar saved in a shop full of debts he never once collected. He swallowed. I used to argue with him about it, told him he was going to die poor for being so soft, and he did die poor. But look what I'm telling you. Tonight, 2 years later, his engine is about to carry a daughter to her father, and all the money I told him to go collect wouldn't buy a single bolt tonight. He looked at the engine. Maybe I was the stubborn one. And whatever happened to the man from the ridge, she asked, not entirely sure why she was asking. Passed on too, years back, poor fellow. Pop Eddie put a wet hand on Dean's shoulder. Car passed from hand to hand, and here it is landing right back here on a stormy night in this lady's hands, nobody looking for it, and it came home without even knowing it was coming home. Funny how life works, boy. And what does that change? She asked carefully, almost afraid to break something. The car's still broken. I'm still in a hurry. With all due respect to your father, sir, I need it to start. Both men turned to look at her as if they'd forgotten for a moment she was there. I'll tell you what it changes, young lady, Pop Eddie said with a tired smile. The car's still broken, you're right about that. But look here, a while ago this boy was going to fix your car for your $5,000, half-heartedly, like just another job. He squeezed Dean's shoulder. Now he's going to fix it because it's his father's engine, and working for a father doesn't look anything like working for a stack of bills. Believe me, I've seen it for 74 years. Dean didn't say yes, but he pulled the rag off his shoulder, hung it on the hook, rolled up his sleeves, and bent back over the hood a different way, slower, more from the inside, the way a man kneels down. All right, Dad, he said very softly, laying his open palm on the cold block. Let's see what happened to this thing you built. What broke on you here? Help me out. I don't remember all your tricks by myself. You're not alone, son, Pop, Eddie said, pulling the stool over to sit beside him. Never were. You're just stubborn. That's different. Hand me those pliers and let me earn that soup you promised me. Dean worked 40 minutes with Pop Eddie passing him tools from the bench, naming things before he even asked for them, with that memory of 2 pairs of hands that had spent a whole lifetime working the same street. Victoria stood there, arms crossed, checking the clock now and then, biting back the urge to rush them. It was Pop Eddie who finally asked her, without pausing his work, arranging wrenches in a row. So why the rush, young lady? That engine's got its own clock. Can't push it. Where are you headed with all that water coming down? Victoria didn't answer right away. She looked at the open door, the flooded street, the closed-in night. I'm going up to the mountains, she said at last, to Ridgeview. 3 hours if the road were open. The road up to Ridgeview closes with this kind of rain, Pop Eddie said. Washes out around mile marker 12 every single year. What's got you needing to go up there so bad it can't wait for daylight? A silence. And then the answer came out lower than anything Victoria had said all night. No boss in it, no numbers. Because my father is dying. Dean stopped his hand inside the engine. He's at the hospital in Ridgeview, Victoria went on, staring at a fixed point on the wet floor. He doesn't have much time left. Hours, they told me on the phone a while ago. And every road I know how to take is closed. The plane won't fly. The helicopter can't get up in this wind. Roy's right. Nothing gets me there in time. She swallowed. Except maybe this car I bought 2 weeks ago because I liked the look of it in the showroom with no idea what I'd need it for. It's the only thing that can handle that road if they even open it for a stretch before dawn. An old car. Tall, heavy one. Of the kind that can climb through mud. That's why I came in here in such a rush, not for fun. That's why I need it to start. Nobody said anything for a moment. The rain filled the gap. "Why didn't you go sooner?" Pop Eddie asked. No cruelty in it, just the plain honesty of old men. If he's got that little time left, he's likely been sick a while. Folks don't drop dead all of a sudden at that age. He's been sick for months. Victoria's voice went tight, almost hoarse. "And I've spent months sending money. Round-the-clock nurses, specialists flown in from the city, the best room in the Ridgeview Hospital, a machine we brought in from out of state on a private plane. I sent everything money could buy. Everything because that's what I know how to do for the people I love. I send what's needed. I delegate, I solve, I pay." She clenched her teeth. "And this afternoon, they called to tell me none of that matters anymore, that the machine isn't doing anything for him now, that all that's left is to go myself in person empty-handed. And it turns out the one thing I need to give him can't be wired through a bank, and there's no road, and there's no plane, and there's a storm that doesn't care who I am or what's in my account." Dean listened from the engine without turning around, and something in what she said struck an old bone in him, one that had been cracked the same way on his side. "And what are you going to tell him?" he asked, without thinking it through, voice low. "When you get there, what are you going to say, that you couldn't send him all these months?" Victoria looked at him, surprised by the question that he'd asked that and not something else. "I don't know," she said, and for the first time she sounded truly lost. "Something. Everything. Nothing I ever sent him was what I actually wanted to say. He raised me that way, you know, checks. Long distance, birthdays in an envelope without him in it. I learned as a kid that affection in my house got wired, deposited, signed, and I turned out just the same. I've sent him money my whole life instead of sitting down and talking to him. And now that there's no time left, I understand I never once told him the only thing that mattered, which was nothing fancy, just that I love him and that maybe I forgive him, though I still don't know if I can." "And why haven't you forgiven him?" Dean asked, still working. "If you're driving 3 hours through the rain to watch him go, something in you already forgives him, because he was never there." Victoria's voice hardened, but underneath it trembled. "Not for a single day that mattered. I saw my first communion in a photograph." He sent it through his secretary. "My graduation, a wire transfer. The day I opened my first company, a flower arrangement so big it didn't fit in the office, with a card signed by somebody who wasn't him." She hugged her arms tighter. "I learned to read my father's love in dollar amounts. The bigger the check, the further away he'd been, and I got real good at collecting them. I became a CEO, sir, because money was the only language my father and I ever learned to speak to each other in our whole lives." Dean tightened a bolt that was already tight just to have something to do with his hands. He knew that way of talking, the kind where someone recites an old wound so many times they can say it word for word without crying anymore. Like someone reading an old ledger out loud. He'd watched her sweat under that ruined blouse, tremble without admitting it, clutch that stack of bills like without it in her hand she'd be defenseless. And now he heard her lay herself bare in a few sentences, and for the first time all night she seemed to him less like a CEO and more like a frightened daughter dressed up as one. "And today you're going to tell him something in a different language." "Today I'm going to tell him something in no language at all," Victoria said. "Just the truth." She laughed without any humor, eyes shining, "And it turns out the truth doesn't fly. On a private plane, doesn't climb a mountain road, and can't be bought open at this hour of the morning. The truth travels in an old car I didn't even know I needed." How ridiculous. Dean looked up for a second. "It's not ridiculous. It's the least ridiculous thing you've said all night." "Why?" "Because the truth that needs an old car to get there is a truth worth something. A lie travels light, flies wherever it wants. What actually weighs something has to climb the mountain's slow mud up to the rims, same as this car." Dean tightened something with the wrench. "Your father's going to know that truth was big just from the trouble it took to get to him. That counts too, even if you don't say it out loud." Victoria stared at him without words for once all night, and then came the scare. Dean was underneath, adjusting the hydraulic jack to check the frame half his body under the car. The rain had left the shop floor slick, and the jack, resting on wet concrete, slipped all at once. The car lurched sideways with a sharp screech of metal on metal. The work lamp jumped off its hook and shattered against the floor in a burst of glass and sparks. And the shop went dark for one full second, the orange car swaying on the crooked jack, Dean's legs still underneath. Dean! Victoria's scream tore through the whole night. It wasn't a CEO scream. It came from somewhere further in, the kind that gets out before a person decides to let it out. She threw herself onto the wet floor, without thinking about her blouse, without thinking about the water or the scattered glass, and grabbed the edge of the hood with both hands as if that could hold up 2 tons of steel. "Get out! Get out of there! Get out!" Dean rolled out the other side safe, heart slamming against his ribs, and sat there in a puddle, gasping. Pop Eddie was already wedging a brick under the tire with shaking hands and an agility that had come back to him all at once. "I'm fine," Dean said, voice cracked. "I'm fine. Nothing happened. Jack just slipped. I'm fine." Victoria was still on her knees in the water, soaked to the hair, still clutching the hood, breathing hard, shaking all over. And when she understood he was fine, that the car hadn't crushed him, something broke in her face that she couldn't put back together in time. It wasn't the pride from the doorway or the rush of the clock. It was pure, naked terror, a woman who'd spent the whole night racing against the idea of arriving too late, and whom life had just taught in 1 second with a piece of metal and a spark how fast you can lose somebody. "Sorry," she murmured, not letting go of the hood, voice in pieces. "Sorry, I thought I'd lost you. I thought I lost you, and I don't even know your last name." "Now you know what you thought." Dean looked at her from the floor, his face different, none of the roughness from the door. "I thought it too, and let me tell you something, ma'am. Now that the both of us are sitting here in the same puddle, that scare you just felt, that's what it feels like the whole time when you're racing against a real clock. Don't forget it. It'll serve you well up there." They set up the spare lamp, hung a new light from a sturdier hook, straightened the jack with a brick wedged under each tire. Victoria sat on the workbench with her hair dripping, not caring anymore about the ruined blouse or the runs in her stockings from the glass. Pop Eddie draped an old wool blanket over her shoulders, pulled from a drawer, one that smelled of motor oil and years and coffee. "Put that on, girl, you'll catch your death. And there's enough sick folks tonight, 3 hours from here." "Thank you," Victoria said, and the word came out strange, barely used, like a tool pulled from the bottom of a drawer you don't remember what it's for. Dean went back to the engine. He found the problem in another half hour, a worn fuel pump part cracked on the inside that had been warning them for days and had finally given out that night. He pulled it, cleaned it, held it under the light, showed it to Pop Eddie. "Here it is," he said. "This is what left you stranded. Cracked clean through, look. Whole thing needs replacing. Rebuilding it won't hold. It'll break again in 10 miles. You got one?" the old man asked, squinting at the part. Dean didn't answer right away. He searched the drawers, the parts bins, the shelves up top with an urgency that kept climbing until it tightened his jaw. He felt Victoria's eyes on his back, following his hands, and he knew she'd already read in the way he was searching that the answer wasn't going to be one she liked. "No," Dean said at last, closing the last drawer. "I don't have one. It's a part for a 50-year-old car. I don't carry it, and at this hour, in this storm, there's not a single parts store open anywhere in this city. And even if there were, there's nobody who could get it here with the streets turned into rivers." Victoria stood up fast, the blanket sliding off her shoulders. "How much does that part cost?" "It's not a question of cost, ma'am. Everything's a question of cost. Let me do what I know how to do." She pulled out her phone, dialed, put it to her ear, hand shaking. "Roy, I need a part. A fuel pump for a classic car, a 70s model. I need it within the hour. Pay whatever it costs. Pull somebody out of bed. Force a parts store open with lawyers if you have to. Offer 10,000, 20, 50, whatever it takes. Find it and get it here." On the other end, Roy Kane's voice tired, almost pitying. "Victoria, it's 1:30 in the morning. It's coming down like the end of the world. Even if I found that part this second, which I won't because there's nobody awake to sell it, there's no way it makes it to that garage before sunrise." Downtown shut down from flooding, The mountain road's closed from a washout. Money doesn't move tonight, Victoria, and not because it isn't worth anything, because the water doesn't take payment and the rivers don't accept wire transfers. Find it, Roy. It's the only thing I've asked you in 10 years that actually mattered to me. There's nowhere, there's no way, there's no time, and believe me, it hurts to tell you that. Roy's voice softened, and that made it worse. And let me say one more thing, because I've worked for you 10 years, and tonight I owe you the truth, straight. You're right, you hear me. Under normal circumstances, you'd be completely right. A woman like you, your time is worth more than anybody's in this city. Money moves mountains any given Tuesday. I've seen your money open doors even the government can't open, push up surgeries, fly in equipment from another country in a single afternoon. But not tonight. Tonight, you drew the one night on the whole calendar where no amount of money moves a single minute. And it isn't fair, and it's a rotten deal, but that's how it is, and the best thing I can do for you is not lie to you. Victoria lowered the phone slowly. She didn't hang up, just lowered it and stood staring at the dark screen, and for one very long moment, the whole shop held nothing but the sound of the rain on the roof. Money doesn't fix physics, she said very quietly, almost to herself. Dean from the engine heard her repeat her own words back, and he didn't feel the satisfaction of being right. He felt the exact opposite, a weight in his chest because he'd heard her say it not as contempt this time, but as defeat. And a defeat like that you don't wish on anybody. "Ma'am," he said, "come here a minute. Let me tell you something I haven't told hardly anybody." She came closer, blanket hanging from one hand. "My father died far from here too," Dean said, still looking at the broken part between his fingers. "In some little clinic out in the sticks, and I got there too late, not because of a storm, over something stupid, some stubbornness of my own. I fought with him a year before he passed over something about the shop, a bill, a customer, one of those things you can't even remember clearly with distance, and I stopped coming around, stopped answering him. I told myself once he cooled off, once I had a free minute, once there'd be plenty of time later." He clenched the part in his fist. "And one day they called to tell me it was time, that I'd better hurry, and I got in the car and drove like a madman all night praying I'd make it, and I got there 20 minutes late. 20 minutes, ma'am. He died without me telling him what I needed to tell him, which was something small, exactly like yours. Just, sorry, that's all, and I've had that word stuck right here ever since." Victoria didn't say anything. She listened to all of it without interrupting once. "I'm telling you this," Dean went on, "because I know what it's like to race against a clock you let run out yourself. And I don't wish that on you either, after you threw $5,000 in my face like I was some kind of vending machine. So I'm going to be honest with you, same as Roy was honest with you. With this part broken, this engine doesn't start, and there's no part and there's no time to get one anywhere. That's the exact size of what we're dealing with tonight." "And what did you do?" Victoria asked, very quiet. "Afterward, when you got there too late and couldn't tell him anything?" "Nothing." Dean set the broken part on the bench. "That's the worst part. I did nothing. I kept that word stuck and I swallowed it. Buried my father, opened the shop the next day because there were customers waiting, and I kept going." He wiped his hands slowly. "And I've spent 2 years running this shop alone, not letting anybody help me, not letting anybody tell me anything, because I convinced myself that a man who carries it all by himself can't ever be late for anybody again. If you carry everything alone, you don't let anybody else down, see? Nobody to disappoint." "That's not true," Victoria said. "You're letting yourself down." Dean went quiet. Nobody had said that to him in 2 years. Nobody had gotten close enough to say it. Maybe he admitted rough. "But it's easier to let yourself down than a dead man. I can't reach the dead man anymore. I can still reach myself. Someday, when I run out of stubborn." He picked the broken part back up. "That's why I'm telling you not to hold anything back up there, ma'am, because I know exactly how much a word you didn't say in time weighs. I carry it here every single day, and I don't wish that on anybody." "Thank you for telling me," Victoria said. "I know you don't talk about it much. I never talk about it." Dean surprised himself. "I don't know why I told you. Maybe because you're about to drive up that mountain in a while, and I needed somebody up there to know, so it means something, arriving on time. It's not a small thing. It's the difference between carrying a word for 2 years or setting it down and finally being at peace. And Victoria, the woman who solved everything by buying it, delegating it, or suing over it, sank back down onto the bench, covered her face with both hands, grease-stained now, and for the first time all night she didn't know who to give an order to. It was Pop Eddie who broke the silence. He'd been standing by the bench, turning the broken part over with one finger, studying it in the light. "Money shows up late everywhere, girl," the old man said, not looking at her, finally letting go of something he seemed to have been carrying all night. "The one who gets there on time is the one who stays and does the work." Victoria lifted her face from her hands. "I've seen it," Pop Eddie went on, turning to face her now. 74 years on this street, and I've seen it over and over. When it truly counts, nobody's wallet saves them. What saves them is the hands that stayed, the ones that didn't leave when it got ugly and dark and there wasn't any profit in it. He turned the part over once more and set it down in front of Dean. "Boy, you can make this part." Dean took it, held it up to the light, turned it, measured the broken edge with his thumb. "Make it with the lathe, with your hands, the way your father would have made it if at 2 in the morning he hadn't had anywhere to buy it." Pop Eddie looked at him, steady, unblinking. "I saw him make parts that didn't exist anywhere anymore, more than once, Dean, with a scrap of bar stock and patience. And you've got the same hands he did, stubborn boy. You just need reminding you've got them, and to quit carrying it all alone, like asking for help makes you less of a man somehow." Dean stared at the broken part, then at the old lathe in the corner, then at his father's open engine still waiting in the orange hood. "Your lathe works better for this than mine," he said, more to himself than anybody. "Mine's got play in it. It'll turn out crooked." "Then let's go to mine. It's 30 steps away," the old man said, already getting up with effort. "We'll get a little more wet, and at this hour of the morning, what's one more soaking?" The three of them crossed through the rain. 30 steps of flooded sidewalk to Pop Eddie's shop on the corner, the broken part held safe in Dean's fist. And there, with a chunk of bronze bar stock the old man had kept in a drawer that smelled of oil since who knows when, Dean began hand-machining the part that no longer existed anywhere in the world. He measured the broken one with calipers, marked it, mounted the bar stock in the lathe, set the speed, and began. And at some point, without him asking, Victoria stopped watching the clock and started doing something else. "What do you need me to hold?" she asked, standing beside him. Dean looked up, surprised. "The lamp! Right here at this angle, fixed. I need the light nailed on the tip of the tool. It can't move an inch or I'll ruin the measurement." She took the lamp and held it steady with both hands, without complaining when it started to weigh on her arms, without complaining when hot bronze shavings landed on her bare forearm. When he asked for the calipers, she found them on the bench and put them in his hand. When he asked for the rag, she passed it over. When he muttered that sweat was running into his eyes and both his hands were busy, she hesitated half a second and then wiped it away with the back of her wrist, clumsy and careful, without a word. "You're shaking," Dean said, not stopping, the lath eyes on the part. "So are you." "I'm shaking from cold, ma'am." "You're shaking from something else." Victoria didn't deny it. She stood there a while, holding the light, watching the bar of bronze stop being a bar and start becoming a part. They were standing close. Pop Eddie's lathe was small, and for the light to fall exactly where Dean needed it, Victoria had ended up pressed in until her shoulder rested against his arm warm through the wet fabric. Dean noticed it without stopping the lathe. The smell of rain and something expensive still caught in her hair, mixing now with oil and burnt bronze. The way her breathing had slowed to match his, without either of them saying so, slower, deeper. The way you breathe when you're really watching one single thing in the world. He didn't pull his arm away. She didn't either. And for a long while there was no more shop than that circle of light she held steady and the metal they were slowly shaping under his hands. "How'd you learn to do this?" she asked, watching his hands on the lathe. "Making a part out of nothing." By watching him. There's no other way. Dean didn't look up from the tool. My father didn't teach me with words. He'd put me next to him, hand me the lamp, same as you're doing now, and say, "Hold the light," and hush. And I'd hold the light and hush. And from watching him so much, one day my hands just knew without me ever telling them to. That's how you learn what actually matters, ma'am. Standing beside somebody holding their light without them explaining it to you in a lecture. Victoria lowered her eyes a little to her own hands holding the lamp. If I ever have a daughter, she said suddenly, like the thought surprised even her, I'm not going to raise her by wire transfer. I'm going to have her hold my light even if she doesn't understand yet what it's for. Good start, Dean, blew away a shaving. Hopefully, the ones raised by wire transfer grow up into some pretty sad CEOs. No offense. None taken. Victoria let out a short laugh, the first of the night, made of rainwater and exhaustion and something newer. That's exactly what I am, a very sad CEO holding a lamp for a rude mechanic in the middle of the night so I can get to a father I'm only just now brave enough to miss. Best resume I ever heard, Dean said, and under the grease, something curved at his mouth. And what would you put on yours, mechanic? Mechanic's son. Stubborn, they say. He blew on the part again. And as of tonight, the man who hand-machined a fuel pump so a very sad CEO could get to her father. I'd put that at the top, ahead of everything else I've ever done. Victoria said nothing, but she held the lamp a little steadier as if the whole resume depended on it. Tell me the truth, she said at last. No pleasantries. Is what you're making going to work? Is it going to hold up 3 hours on a mountain, or is it going to snap halfway there and leave me stuck at some washout with my father dying up top and me stuck down below, too late again? Dean stopped the lathe, looked at her straight on. I'm not going to lie to you to make you feel better because you don't need to feel better. You need the truth. I don't know if it'll hold. I'm making it by hand out of a scrap of bronze at 2 a.m. against the clock. Might hold 1,000 miles, might hold 10. What I can promise you is I'm making it exactly the way the man who built that engine would have made it, with the same care, cutting no corners. And that man never handed over anything he hadn't staked himself on. He switched the lathe back on. That's the only thing I've got to give you tonight. It's not a store-bought guarantee. It's a real promise made good. You decide if it's enough. That's your call to make. Victoria stayed quiet a long while, holding the light steady, her hand no longer shaking. It's enough, she said, then lower almost to the sound of the lathe. You know what the worst part of tonight is? I've spent my whole life believing I had my father figured out with money. That as long as I sent him the best of everything I was doing right, loving him the way you're supposed to love a father. And right now, watching you hand machine a scrap of bronze for a stranger who insulted you, I understand I never once gave my father anything that cost me my hands, only things that cost me money. And money, I learned tonight the hard way, never cost me anything of my own. Just money. Pop Eddie, standing in the doorway of his shop watching the rain, didn't say a word. He just crossed himself slowly for 2 dead men at once, and for 1 living woman only just beginning to be born. Almost there, Dean said, pulling the part from the lathe, still warm between his fingers. He polished it with a cloth, measured it once more, blew off the last shaving. Let's get back. I'll put it in and we'll test it. And I'll tell you now, ma'am, from here on, it's not about hands or money anymore. It's about whether this engine of my father's wants to run one more time to carry you to yours. And that's not something either of us controls. Go on and pray whatever you know how to pray. They crossed back through the rain, the still warm part wrapped in a rag, Dean carrying it with both hands, the way you carry something alive. He got into the engine bay, mounted the pump, adjusted the belt with the bracket, the one his father had filed, for fingers thick as his own, and for 1 second with his fingers right there in the notch his father had made, for hands just like that, he felt like he was working 4-handed with a dead man. Victoria held the lamp without being asked. Pop Eddie stood by the door with his hands, folded lips moving just barely. Ready, Dean said at last, coming out from under the hood, hands black to the elbow. Get in, push the clutch, hold the brake, and when I tell you, give it gas easy. Victoria climbed into the orange car with Pop Eddie's blanket still around her shoulders, her hands filthy with grease on the wheel of a dead man she'd never known. Dean stood by the window in the pouring rain, no shelter, not caring that he was getting soaked through. On the count of 3, he said slow, "Don't flood it. If it coughs and dies, don't keep cranking. You'll choke it and lose it. Give it 3 seconds to breathe and try again. Listen to it. Don't fight it." He laid his open palm on the hood, on the cold metal that trembled just from not starting yet. 1 second, 2, like laying a hand on someone's shoulder before asking them for the impossible. "Come on, Dad. One more. Just one. Carry her to hers. You knew all about that. Go ahead," he said. Victoria turned the key. The engine coughed, shuddered all over, died. Again, Dean said, voice tight, hand still on the metal. "Let it breathe. Don't rush it." Again. Now. She waited 3 seconds that felt like 3 years, knuckles white on the wheel, and turned the key again. The engine coughed, coughed again, caught a low, shaky rumble, hesitated, seemed like it would die. And then, with a rough roar that shook the whole car, and the puddle underneath, and all 3 of their chests at once, it started. It started! It caught steady, firm, alive, the engine a dead man had built with his own 2 hands 7 years before, roaring in the storm-soaked dawn to carry a daughter to her father. Dean stood in the rain with his hands still on the hood, warm now, and felt his throat close up in a way it hadn't in 2 years, not since those 20 minutes he'd shown up late. "Go on," he murmured. Not to her, to the engine, to the air. "You did want to in the end, Dad. You did want to." Victoria looked at him from inside the car, through the wet window, her face streaming with rain, and with something else, and she didn't say thank you with her mouth, she said it with her hand. She reached it out the window and set it for 1 second on top of his both hands, filthy with grease, resting on the hood over the running engine. Nothing more was needed. Everything they had to say to each other that night fit in 2 grease-stained hands on a piece of shaking metal. "Go on," Dean said, stepping back from the window. "Don't waste the time it cost us to earn you. They say mile marker 12 opens up sometimes toward dawn, once the water goes down. Go slow. Listen to the engine the whole way, and if it talks to you, listen to it, because this car knows that mountain better than you do." He swallowed. "And when you get there, tell your father whatever you need to tell him. Don't hold back a single word. Don't let it end up like mine." "I'm not going to hold anything back," Victoria said, her voice finally steady. "I promise you that. And I don't even know your last name." "Dean Marlowe, son of Walt Dean," said tired but smiling faintly. "Go on, Victoria Hale. Get there." And she drove off the orange car, throwing up water from its tires down the street and toward the closed mountain road, toward the one dawn of her whole life when no amount of money had helped her and a pair of hands had. Dean stood in the doorway of the shop, soaked through, watching her disappear into the rain and the red taillights. "Will she make it?" he asked without turning around, eyes fixed on the empty street. "She's riding on your daddy's engine, boy, Pop," Eddie said, setting a hand on his wet shoulder. "Walt never left anybody stranded in his whole life, dead or alive." "It's a closed mountain, Pop Eddie. A washout, a storm. The engine can hold and the road still might not open. Might." The old man shrugged easy with an old kind of calm. "But look here, son, tonight, of everything this city had to offer to get her up there, the only thing that worked was your daddy's hands and yours. Not her money, not her lawyers, not her planes. The hands. If anything's going to beat that mountain, it'll be them again." He squeezed his shoulder. "Get inside. Now it's soup time. And say a prayer while you're at it. They say prayer's free, and sometimes it even works." She made it. Nobody at the shop knew it that night, or the next day. The mountain swallowed the orange car, and the storm swallowed the hours. Dean went to sleep at dawn, not knowing whether that woman had made it in time, or was sitting stranded at some washout on mile marker 12. No cameras, no witnesses, no item in any newspaper, no photograph of anybody, no gossip column. It was a thing between the rain, an engine, and 2 fathers, and that's how it stayed, the world none the wiser. Victoria pushed open the door of the room at Ridgeview Hospital at 5:40 in the morning. Pop Eddie's blanket still around her shoulders, her hands still stained with grease she hadn't wanted to wash off on the drive. Her father was awake. He had 2 days left, not 2 hours, but she didn't know that yet, and so what she told him like it was the last minutes of the world. No check involved, no number, nothing that could be wired to any account. She told him what had been stuck in her since she was a girl. Told him she loved him and that she forgave him and found in the saying of it that it was true. And her father, Julian Hale, who'd raised her on envelopes and absences because it was the only thing he'd ever known how to give, cried like he hadn't cried since he was young, and took her grease-stained hand in his and told her those mechanics' hands were the prettiest thing he'd seen his whole life. He lived 2 more days, and in those 2 days they said everything they'd kept quiet for 20 years. That too stayed between them, with no witnesses. Dean didn't know any of it at the time. 9 days went by without him knowing fixing other people's cars with his mind stuck on a mountain road. Pop Eddie caught him 3 separate times looking at the door every time an engine passed on the street. "You're waiting on her," the old man said, the 4th day, drinking coffee on their usual stool. "I'm waiting to hear she didn't wreck in some washout, Pop Eddie. That's a different thing." "It's the exact same thing," Boy just said, by a stubborn man. Pop Eddie took a sip of his coffee. "Your daddy was the same way. He'd fall for somebody and call it worry over the customer, he'd say," he laughed. "And then he went and married the customer, your mama, who showed up one day with a busted radio and never did leave." "It's not the same thing." "You've said that already, and every time you say it, you believe it a little less." The old man stood with some effort. "If she comes back, Boy, don't talk to her the way you did at the start. All that roughness of yours, that scares folks off. Talk to her the way you did at the end, when you were holding her hand on the hood without even noticing. That voice, that one works. The other one just scares off cars and women." Dean didn't answer, but on the 5th day he swept the whole shop clean, and on the 6th he realized he'd swept it so it wouldn't look so shabby, and he didn't know quite who for, and he decided not to think about it. "You finally figure out what you're scared of?" Pop Eddie asked on the 8th day out of nowhere. "That she doesn't come back." "That's just one kind of scared, Boy," the old man smiled slowly. "The other kind was being scared she would come back and make you change. You've already let go of that one. This new one holds up better." Days later, an orange car pulled up outside Dean's shop in the full light of afternoon, not a drop of rain in the sky. Victoria stepped out. No blouse, no heels this time. Jeans, an old t-shirt, her copper hair pulled back in a ponytail, and in her hand, no stack of bills. Nothing in her hand at all. "It's due for a tune-up," she said, leaning in the doorway of the shop. "That's what you told me that night, between one thing and another, that at 3,000 miles it needs a tune-up. I've got the miles." Dean straightened up from the car he'd been working on, wiped his hands slowly on the rag, and couldn't quite hide what it did to his face, seeing her there in jeans, no rush, no money. "And your father?" he asked. "He lived 2 days longer than they told me." Victoria smiled, and the smile trembled a little at the edge. "I made it, Dean. I told him everything. Everything you told me not to hold back. He died knowing it, and I was the one left without anything stuck inside me for the first time in my life." Her eyes went wet, but she didn't lower them. "Thanks to an engine and a pair of hands that didn't charge me what they were worth." Dean didn't know how to answer that, and because he didn't know, he did what he always did when something squeezed his chest. He wiped his hands on the rag even though they were already clean. They stood there a moment like that, her leaning in the doorway with the afternoon sun behind her, him by the car without filling the silence with anything, and for once, the silence didn't weigh a thing. 9 days earlier, this same woman had thrown $5,000 in his face, and he'd answered her with nothing but barking. Now she stood there in jeans, no rush, no wallet in sight, and all that was left of that stormy night was her father's engine purring low between them, like it too had been waiting on her. I brought you something, Victoria said. It's not money. I learned that lesson at least. She pulled from the passenger seat Pop Eddie's blanket, washed and folded with care, and set it on the bench. Give this back to Mr. Eddie for me. Tell him it kept me warmer than anything I own back home, and I own plenty. She looked around the shop, the lamp, the little shrine in the corner with the old photograph tucked among the tools. That's him, isn't it? In the photo. Walt. That's him. Victoria walked over to the photograph and, without anybody asking her to, without a camera, no witness but Dean, spoke quietly to the dead man. Thank you, she told him. Your engine got me there. I made it to my father in time. I owe the most important conversation of my life to a man I never met. She crossed herself, clumsy like someone who doesn't do it often. Look after this one too. He's just as stubborn as you were. Dean swallowed and didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly, not quite sure what to do with his chest. He walked over to the orange car, opened the hood, leaned in to look at his father's engine. Still there, alive, purring, low idling, gentle. He ran his thumb over the bracket with the extra curve, the notch made for fingers like his own, and he told it the only thing he knew how to say when something moved him for real, in the one language his father had ever taught him. Quiet, almost like reading a diagnosis out loud. This engine's still got a lot of miles left in it, he said, without turning to look at her, eyes on the block. If you want, we can check it together every 3,000 miles, see how far it takes us. Victoria came closer, stood beside him in front of the open hood, and set her hands on the edge of the metal next to his, not afraid of the grease anymore. I want that, she said. And a dead man's engine kept running steady and stubborn between two pairs of dirty hands resting side by side on the hood, in a neighborhood shop where it wasn't raining anymore, and where the world outside never found out about any of it. To all of you who love a good story like this one, this rainy tale is done, and it's a hard one to let go of. It doesn't end with a wedding, or a scandal just quietly between two people and a dead man in a shop nobody else ever saw. And let me admit something. A lot of folks are going to think that Lawyer Roy had more sense than the rest of us put together, and maybe he did. Money moves almost everything almost always. But there's one night, just one, when no amount of it hurries the clock along even a single minute, and that night belongs only to the hands that stayed to do the work. So this time, I don't want you to rate the story. I want a memory from you instead. Was there ever a night you raced against the clock to reach somebody before it was too late? Did you make it in time, like Victoria? Or did you miss it by 20 minutes, like Dean? Tell me down below.